In this church, one of the things that we started to do as a tradition is to make January Prosperity Month, the month that we kick off our new start of a new year. Now, over the years, I've heard this comment very frequently that all we think about is money and prosperity and that there's not really any spiritual content. But what we do know is the truth is that everything is spiritual. And what we do as spiritual teachers is find a way to teach you spiritual truth where your need is, where your predominant need is, because that's when you get it. But it's the same spiritual truth no matter what you're doing. The mechanics of the universe that Glenn and I talk about are the same set of things to follow no matter where you find the need. And Chris, I love what you said, to find something to do that you believe in, and that's something that money can't buy. So that's what we're doing today, about talking about creativity. Now, the first time I ever heard the concept of being a co-creator with God was more than 50 years ago, and I went to my first Edgar Cayce study group, and that's where I heard that. Well, good, I heard it. I didn't know what it meant any more than the man in the moon. It just went. I knew it must be a truth. It made logical sense, but I just couldn't see how physically that we can be a co-creator and that God is within us. It just didn't make sense from where I was coming from. And then maybe 30 years later, I was at a class, and Gene Graves, a minister at Religious Science at the time, put this little drawing on the whiteboard. And it was simply a circle. In the middle of the circle was a dot. It was a cartoon. And he explained that if you could put a cell under a microscope, you couldn't see anything in the middle of that cell. And you couldn't see anything holding the other cells to it. And he said, that's God. That's the God energy in you and in everything holding it together. And finally, I got it. I could see how God could be in us. Finally, it made sense. So the reason I chose this topic about creativity as a conduit, because as a church, there is more creativity in each of you combined together in one place than anything I've ever seen anywhere. Well, maybe the Musicians Union in New York City, but we are equal. You all are equal. Everybody in here, I hear about the creative things that you're doing. We have our musicians and our artists, and it's really a phenomenon to have that vibration of creativity here. Now, in the Bible it says, in the beginning, God created. Now, I'm going to read this because it's really important. You will never be more of the God aspect of yourself than when you're creating. When you are creating, you stand aside and let the energy flow through you into your own creation. You, by nature, as the creator, stand aside and surrender to the muse of inspiration. Now, here's the kicker. It doesn't matter if you make a masterpiece or a mess, because nobody cares. It's not important. What is important that at that moment of creation, it's the act of oneness with all that is divine that's important. It is then you become of use by the divine, not because of the creation, but because of going through the process of creation. You know, in our lives, we built these altars that we worship out of remorse and regret and disappointment. And we mull them over. I know I'm the most guilty, probably, of any of you, and I just have so much remorse for things I could have done differently. And you know what? When you shed this body like a too tight shoe, you don't get to take those mistakes with you. All those things you've been worshiping are gone. It doesn't matter if your life is a masterpiece or a mess. What matters is that you are willing to make the journey. Okay, so here we are, co-creators with God. The energy of all that is also within each of us and responds with vigor when we validate it and when we communicate it. This is where the word quantum comes in. As I understand a quantum leap, it's when you have, under observation, there's a particle here. And then suddenly it's over here. Well, you didn't see the leap. You don't know how it happened. And the leap could be over there. Or the leap could be in China. It's that possibility within us of creating a quantum leap. So keep this in mind as we discuss creativity. Now, one of the interesting things that I've observed is when you're creative, that you're often creative in many facets of your life. Think about Tony Bennett, who is a wonderful singer, but he's also an artist. Okay? Think of an actor or a musician that may be a wonderful cook. What has happened is that you've tapped into the creative source. The connections made. Now think about this. When you are creating something, this is what you do. You just stand there and you're inspired and you do the creating and you're not really thinking about anything else. And if a mistake occurs, then you just make that dot into a flower, or you just do something and you work with the mistake and it becomes a work of art. You know, it's the same process that we should be using in the other areas of our life that we're doing when we're creating. It's the same whether you're having money problems or a relationship problem. It's whether you want to be prosperous or being well or being a lover. What is happening when you are co-creating with God? As I said, that you've tapped in, the connection's made. That's the most important part of creation. The connection is made. Now, in neuro-linguistic programming, they say get a model of something that's successful, that you want to be successful in, and model yourself after that. If you want a diet, observe a person that's thin and see how they eat and model that. Why would that bother? You're already perfect. Model what you do when you are creating, when you're encountering other problems. What happens, say, when you're creating, it just flows through, you make the mistakes, you correct it. But if you're having a money problem, what happens? You get all uptight, you get anxious, and then that old roadblock appears. And you've seen them. They're like little white fences across the road that you couldn't take, and reflective lights. Well, that's what happens to our energy flow when we encounter a problem. That blocks what flows so easily through us as a creator. Now, here's the trick to overcoming this. You give it the power of love. Now, how you do that, I studied this healing modality called quantum touch. And they suggested, for instance, if a person comes to you for a healing session, you know, you might have a human reaction. Maybe they haven't bathed in a week. Maybe they're belligerent. Maybe they're negative, whatever. Your humanness comes up, just like it does when you're having the money problem or the relationship problem. So they give you a trick that changes your vibration from the reactionary situation. The person is before you, and to overcome that human negative reaction, you just close your eyes and you think of that person, your spouse, your child, a grandchild, or maybe it's even a pet. But you think about that, your hands are on the person, and you're thinking about that love. You're conjuring up that love, and soon you find you've relaxed and let go of whatever the reaction is, and you're just being love. And you've just done it with a mental trick. You've totally changed your vibration. You've totally put that barricade aside because you're channeling this love. So what I'm suggesting, that try to do this with your problems like you do when you are being a creator. Now the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter what your creative gift is, you get to use these tools and other things. Emerson says, God enters by a private door into each individual. What that means is that you are unique. God is flowing to you, through you, as you. That's why when we read something that someone has channeled, like the books by Neil Donald Walsh, well, that energy of God that's flowing through him somehow gets to be a liberal Democrat. Don't know how that happened. Okay, what about Abraham Hicks? That channeling information is expressed as Mrs. Hicks, through Mrs. Hicks, and that's her expression. And each of you are a unique idea in the mind of God, and you've contracted to have certain problems only because you also have the tools to overcome those problems, or you have the creative expression to let your unique view flow through you. I stole this from Glenda Walker's famous Facebook post. I don't know if any of you follow her, but it's just, they're always just grab you. So this is what it says. I think everything you do in life is art. What you do, how you dress, how you love someone, how you talk, your smile, your personality, what you believe in, and all your dreams, how you decorate your home, your grocery list. Everything in life is art. And when you're doing these things, it's so natural and it's so easy. It's your expression. So just remember to take that little bit with you that you're using as creation to knock out the barriers. I think of the story that Rebecca told about how she became a sculptor. She said she was walking the dog and she picked something up, and I cannot remember what it was, but she picked something up. And so she went home and she told Jean that she was going to take a welding class. The rest is history. She had an inner dream, she had faith in it, and she followed it, and everything unfolded beautifully. So each of us has an inner dream, if we have the courage to admit what it is. And what I know, that somewhere within each of you, you do know what that dream is. And you know that you know. And you will uncover it. So you see how we unconsciously use the energy that is available to us, that is part of us every day in every way. So the secret to becoming a master of our own life is to start becoming aware of what we do. Whether or not we want to be an artist or a writer, we might want to be more prosperous or have a successful relationship. The creative source is a core impetus in achieving our desires. We cannot not be creative. It was part of our design from the beginning of time. This is our divine heritage. And so here are the three of the main steps. It's whether you're creative, whether you're trying to achieve prosperity. There is no different in this relationship that you have with source energy than when you're courting a lover. You can put all sorts of thought into that process. Okay, the first one is acknowledgement. Just like a lover, Spirit wants to hear from you. You begin to recognize the evidence of Spirit working in your life. You see, in the beginning when we started all this, remember how you used to get a parking space? You're going to go to the mall, so you put in the order for the parking space, it appears. Well, lots of little things are happening in your life to try to let you know that Spirit is working, that love relationship with Spirit is occurring. Okay, the second is communication. You can't have a relationship with another person unless you're going to communicate. It's the same for Spirit. It's validation. In a relationship, the most important thing is validating your partner. Think Spirit's any different? I don't think so. You validate, you say thank you. You treat that Spirit with the same courtesy that you would with a lover. And then the last one is surrender. Now, when you're creating, you don't even know you're surrendering. You just have this inspiration. It flows through you. You're not attached to the outcome. You're not bossing it around and insist on getting the square peg in a round hole. What you do is you create a round peg to fit in the round hole. So the same thing, and this is the most important thing, this is when things turn around, is when you surrender to that relationship. It's like when you get married and you've been an individual for so long, and then one day you wake up and you've found that you've surrendered to the concept of marriage, that you're no longer two individuals, you're one. And it's the same with Spirit. You can't say, I'm going to surrender to Spirit tomorrow. Doesn't happen that way. Surrender comes to you, and one day it's there. But it begins with the acknowledgement. It begins with the communication. Now, this is a little off the wall, but you know me. This is my understanding of what is happening in the energetic world, that everything is speeding up, becoming faster and faster and faster. Now, go back to your childhood and try to remember a certain way that you played. For myself, I had two things that I remember playing. One is I would gather up little cardboard boxes, like the little matchbook holders and toilet paper rolls and all sorts of little pieces of this and that, and I would make villages for the bugs. So, and then my other one is I would operate on all my stuffed animals. I was John of God to that teddy bear. But now in my adult life, because of Glenn, then I'm participating in the building process, and because of my interest, I may not be John of God or a surgeon, but I try to let the healing energy flow through me. Now, each of you has something that you did as a child that appears to be missing. And as I understand it, that on other levels of energy that we can't see, that there could be a probable self out there of each of you doing the things that you neglected. You already saw what the potential might be of that childhood game that you play, that it was revealing without hindrance a part of you that had an innate talent to do something. Now, as I understand it from what I've read, that those probable cells are coming back and being integrated into your being and becoming one with you. And the evidence of that is that you find old friends are drifting off, no animosity, no harm, no blame. They just go their way. And new friends are coming in that stand at an open door that assists that probable self of expressing. That's my off-the-wall thing. Now, I want to know, what do you think is the most predominant thing that keeps you from expressing your creativity or you getting a new job or whatever? It's fear. That's it. It could be fear of success. It could be fear of failure. Nevertheless, it's fear, which is an illusion. This is what Helen Keller says. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or it's nothing. So take charge, follow the 3 rules, communicate, acknowledge, follow the evidence, surrender, gratitude. Just open yourself to the new vision and get out of the box. Let your possibilities become probabilities. You will never be more of the God aspect of yourself than when you're creating. When you are creating, you stand aside and let the energy flow through you into your own creation. You, by nature, as the creator, stand aside and surrender to the muse of inspiration. Now here's the kicker. It's not important if you create a masterpiece or a mess. It is the active oneness with all that is divine that is important when we create. It is then that you become of use, not because of the creation, but because of going through the process of creation. And that is called living in grace.